information, we want to be thinking about things that happened in their society, some of the things that they chose to do, or some maybe ways that they lived, parts of their life. And then we want to think about why, what reasons there are that we can think of that might have led to those decisions. It's kind of an interesting way of thinking about history. All right, so this starts off by saying, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Lowlands region is now part of the provinces of Ontario and Quebec. Provinces and countries did not exist during this early time period, and several different Indigenous peoples groups lived in this area in what is now Southern Ontario and New York, so Canada and United States. 5 of these groups joined together to become part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as 5 Nations. And these groups were the Oneida, Mohawk, Onondaga, Seneca, and Cayuga. Much later, a 6th group joined, the Tuscarora, and we have the 6 Nations. Some people call the area the 5 Nations. Some people call the area the 5 Nations people lived in the Eastern Woodlands. We also call this area the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Lowland. Okay. So the 6 Nations people lived in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Lowlands region of what is now Canada, and this box kind of shows you on the map. You also have a map that shows where the 6 Nations people lived, and you have one that you created. So we do know whereabouts they lived. So this just says Confederacy is a large group of smaller groups with common ideas. So the 6 Nations is a confederacy of those 6 groups. All right, important features of Great Lakes St. Lawrence Lowlands. So this is important to keep in mind. This is the features of the land that they were living on. And a lot of times the land gives us good reason why things were done the way they were done. So let's learn about the land. Flatlands broken by hills in deep river valleys. The soil is very fertile, meaning it's good for farming. There are lots of trees. The weather can be very humid, contains lots of moisture. Winters can be cool and snowy. Summers can be hot and humid with many thunderstorms. And it has a long growing season in many forests. And all these things should be really familiar to you because this is the land that we live on. So if you're living in the city, you just would have to drive a little ways out to the country to start being like, oh yeah, I see lots of farmland and I know there's forests around. And definitely this describes our climate. So it can be humid in the summer, winters are cool and snowy, and we have a long growing season. Okay, so let's scroll down. And if you would like to do a little bit of reading on this page, you can raise a digital hand and I'll just see if I can see any hands up. Maybe we'll have some new people to read today.
Thank you. The 6 Nations people lived near large lakes, as well as many rivers. The land around these lakes and rivers was very good for growing crops. They grew a lot of corn and even made popcorn.
Good. Read this one too. Keep going.
They often grew their corn with squash and beans together. This helped all 3 types of vegetables grow best.
Good. You can stop there. So in this picture, you have a picture of corn in the back, or corn here. We've got beans and squash and pumpkins. Pumpkins are part of that squash family. And they would make gardens where they would grow all 3 of these things. And they all benefited each other. So they would grow together. And these vegetables together and these types of gardens have the name the 3 Sisters. So that's why it says 3 Sisters: corn, squash, and beans. All right, somebody else with their hand up.
6 Nations group also gathered food such as nuts, berries, and wild rice. Most groups fished as well.
Keep going, please.
The area Six Nations lived and had many types of smaller animals that they could hunt and eat without having to travel long distances. They hunted animals such as rabbits and birds. They were able to grow enough crops that they did not need to make long hunting trips to find larger animals to kill.
Wonderful.
Since Six Nations people did not need to travel to find animals to hunt, they were able to stay in one place for years. They created villages that were long houses where several families lived together. They also built large walls around the villages to prevent attacks from other groups.
Okay, great. Next, we have this part here. I'm looking at my hands that are up.
There were many different types of stone in the area. All endurance people's groups used some types of tools, usually made of stone tools, using materials such as flint or obsidian. Depending upon what was available in the area, spear points, knife blades, scrapers for cleaning hides, goggles, and chisel for working with wood, and drill bits for boring holes have all been found by people searching for events of the past.
Good, and that word is evidence. So historians are always searching for evidence from the past. And way back in our artifacts lesson, you saw artifacts that showed different tools that were made out of stones, and things like spearheads and knife blades, scrapers, gouges, so things like that. All right, I think this is our last paragraph.
Each indigenous peoples groups was fairly
Self-sufficient.
Sufficient.
Good.
Able to take care of their needs themselves, but still often needed to trade things they had enough of for things they needed. For example, a group that lived near a large body of water had plenty of fish, and many had traded some for pottery created by another group.
Awesome. Great reading, everyone.